Now I request our chair, Shri G Narendranath, to kindly offer the opening remarks and begin the first round of discussions with the panelists. Sir.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, and respected members on the panel here, and respected audience here, a well-informed audience. I'm happy to be here, to be associated, and I thank the organization for calling me here. I've been looking at the security function for around 4 years now, and one thing is, it's a very critical function, and I'm really happy to be associated with it. With the demonetization that happened and the push towards digital financial transactions to take over most of the transactions, the burgeoning of e-commerce, and gradually shifting of all transactional operations of all organizations and citizens of this country onto the digital platform, trust is an important part of the whole exercise. As we motivate more and more people to use the digital platform, it's essential that we build an element of trust so that people, it doesn't become a selling exercise and that you push people towards it, but it's a pull exercise that happens, that people willingly accept that it's in their benefit to use the digital platform. And here, when we look at when you talk of security, we talk of the triad, lots of people who are involved in security, maybe I'm repeating myself to those people who already know about it. The CIA triad that we talk of, confidentiality, integrity, and the availability part of it that we talk of. And then we have a panel, which is looking at addressing all the three aspects. The companies are coming with products that you're looking at the confidentiality aspect of it. There's a company which looks at the integrity aspect of it and the availability aspect of it. So we have companies, which are looking at all the three aspects of it and coming with products to ensure that all the three parts of the triad are addressed. When we just generally, when we're looking at security from at the national level, and we look at the different dimensions of it and how do we address the concerns of security? What are the measures that we require to take? Is it just the products that you're talking about, or are there other things also? So the thinking would be that, how do we, one is you look at the products that are there and how do you make the product secure? So that is, one is the secure development itself. Because there's been a stress in, quick to the market. So the general thing is you look at the features that the product would deliver and then, try to get it quickly off the market and really did not go into the security aspect of it. That's been the norm up till now. And that's why you find that, lots of products that come into the market are not having the security features that are required to be built in, because that's not been thought of initially. And then you come up with a turn, walk around or a turn to, address those concerns in terms of trying to build security through patches and maybe subsidiary products that actually would dovetail with that and then try to ensure security. So one of the basic things now that we have companies here which are really into developing products is that security should be an initial part of the design itself as you go ahead, that how the product is going to be used in the different use cases that are there, and then try to understand that where the compromises could happen and what are those features I should build into the product to address those things, in terms of how to ensure the confidentiality of the information that is there, how to ensure the integrity of the information or the systems themselves, and also how to ensure that the systems are not taken down, so that the availability of service is there. So that is one very important part of it. And there's a gradual shift towards that lots of companies are understanding that's a very important critical component of that company. And that is because of learning through experiencing what happens when a security breach occurs. There are companies which have actually failed company because of the obligations and the liabilities that have been put on them because of not exercising due diligence in incorporating security into their infrastructure. And that it's a business continuity risk, that companies face, that is forcing people to look at security. So when they talk of a product now, they're also in the procurement process, they're also looking at how the security architecture of the product is, and whether security is sufficient or not for the use case that they are looking at. So that is one good thing that's coming out, and because it's mostly a forced something that's been forced on them, because they understand it's a very big risk they would be taking if they don't look at it. Okay, so that's one important part. So we interact like in the telecom sector. We have an organization, this standards development body called the 3GPP. People who are in telecom would understand the 3GPP, the Third Generation Partnership Project, that actually comes up with the standards for the mobiles, like the 3G, the 4G, and even the 5G standards that are coming up now. There also, the functional aspects were the focus of that. And bare minimum security in terms of some authentication and was something, and authorization to a certain extent was built into products, but otherwise the other security was not really looked at. It was only in the year 2014 that a separate group had been formed, in the CCAM group and 3GPP, also to look at the security aspects that would horizontally look at the different functional verticals in which the different groups were working, and that security functionality as a horizontal thing was something that was put in place for them to interact with all these separate horizontal verticals, these verticals which are the functional verticals. So it's quite late, if you look at 2014, it's quite late considering that mobile technologies had come quite some time back, sometime in the 80s. So, but it's good that group is there, and they're also coming up with the assurance mechanisms, not only in terms of the architecture that should be built into the products, it's something. They're also looking at an assurance mechanism that should be there, that once a product is developed, how do you assure that the product is secure? So that is one good thing that's happening. In India also, we are actually normally follow the international standards, but because of the lack of international standards, we're looking at how to address those issues as the standards come in. I'll come to that a little part in the bit. I request you that your time. Now, how much time do you have more?
5 minutes.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so this is there. So, one thing is now with newer technologies coming in, like the cloud coming in and the M2M coming in, there are some catastrophic consequences that would come. Because earlier when you talk of cybersecurity, you would look at systems that get affected and there was no real impact on the physical world. Somebody would be losing some money maybe, and some of the data of some person would be impacted. But now with M2M coming in and the sensors, you're collecting data from sensors, and then you have actuators that are getting actuated based on some processing, you would find that you could have some physical impact in terms of infrastructure getting affected and life and property getting affected. So you could have very disastrous consequences as M2M and M2M and IoT proliferates. So it's a real serious concern that this brings about. What are the challenges there? Most of the M2M devices, because the volumes that are there and the small form factor it has got and the low cost at which we try to acquire them, we find that they don't have the necessary footprint inside that to actually build security features. And in terms of the costs also, the people don't have the incentive to put into that. But then we have had instances where the M2M devices have been used for launching major attacks, like the DNS attack that had happened, where services to organizations like Twitter and all were affected for some time because of the DDoS attack that happened, originated from devices like CCTV cameras and DVD inside your house and all of that. So this is an area of concern, that how do you address that? How do you actually mandate? What do you bring in a framework? Whether you mandate that these devices should have minimum these security features that before they can be sold. Okay, and should we bring in some liability which says that okay, because there's incentive for people to buy low cost devices because maybe they are not affected, because their use case would not be critical to them, but the thing is it affects other critical infrastructure. And what could be the liability that we should bring on those people who purchase those low cost devices without really bothering to exercising due diligence? Is it possible to bring something like these? Are things that we might be having to think about as more and more people purchase devices. It's like, buying a motor vehicle which are not having the security features. It doesn't really affect you, but it affects a person on the road. So then you have to mandate that certain basic minimum of characteristics are there required in that device. So it does certain things. Then we also have this shift that's happening towards cloud, where even the network functions that we talk about are getting shifted to those clouds. And as a telecom organization that looks at telecom services, what are the implications of having all of these network functions shifting into the cloud? And are the cloud security features sufficient? And we have this requirement of personally identifying data or India-centric citizen data, whether it should be resident in the country. How would it happen if the cloud is there? How would you migrate data from one cloud to the other? These are things. Cloud, one way you look at it, it gives you better security. It's like this, I have an organization that's in oil sector, let's say, for example, the transportation sector. My core business is not IT, my core business is not security of these IT systems. I have my talents in other areas, maybe in hospitality I have my talent. I've got my talent in transportation. So when I migrate all my systems into the cloud, I give it to an organization that has the expertise to manage IT systems, and that they might be securing the cloud infrastructure in a better way than if I would do it if I'd have those systems in my own organizations, because then building up those skill sets to protect that systems is a challenge for me. So one way the cloud helps you in outsourcing all those critical activities of security and managing ICT infrastructure, which is not your core competence, to organizations which have that competence. So that's one way, that's good. But then we come to that supply chain, and then how do I trust that cloud service provider that with the critical activity? Because then my own survival depends on that availability of the infrastructure. So how do I trust? So these are challenges. So one of the things I was talking about national security and all. So one of the challenges we have here is regarding the supply chain, the trusted chain. Because most of the equipment that we put into our networks is imported. More than 90% of it is imported. And out of that, more than 60 to 70% is imported from one of the countries, which is an area of concern for us. So one thing is we're looking at an domestic environment in which we have manufacture, so that most of the critical equipment that goes into our networks is domestically sourced. And that way, this initiative of ITI to get together people is appreciated in terms of trying to build the ecosystem of Indian manufacture. Considering that, the other challenge we have is that, is it possible to identify trusted sources, work with them, and then over a period of time, we say that we source equipment only from these sources. So, because I'm not talking here only of telecom sector, I'm talking about the power sector, for example. They also have a lot of critical infrastructure that goes in, transportation, civil aviation, so the financial services. So these are all, critical information. How is it that we source that so that we are confident about it? One of the things we thought about is, establishing a testing facility. I mean, how to ensure security through testing. But there are challenges there. Then do we have the competences to test the hardware, the firmware? Can we extract the firmware and test it? So this is a challenge. Then okay. Then is there any other method than, we don't really we do some amount of testing, but is it possible that to behavioral analysis, like, I have a visibility of the traffic that is flowing from the different network elements. I pick up the traffic and then look at the behavioral. I look at the black boxes only. As in the traffic flows, I look at the behavioral analysis and then see, can I detect malicious activity and then try to stop it at that time. So these are, there are many facets. Now, as we, try to encourage an Indian industry in the security area also. The Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister, talking at the NASSCOM event, had talked of, security being a very big business opportunity. And then that India being in the forefront and, developing security products. But when you look at security products, you talk of firewalls and other things. But then we see that there's a drift that's happening, a shift that's happening, that the security is also coming onto the platforms that provide services. It's getting integrated into that. So if you start now working on independent security elements and then developing products, would you become obsolete by the time you really come with the product, maybe say 2 or 3 years down the line, that the whole concept of security has shifted to platforms? Like for example, when you talk of M2M devices, it's a big challenge. How do you authenticate and authorize the thousands of devices that are there? How do you update the software in those devices? So one of the things is that comes out is, we're talking in terms of a common service layer in which all the functions are built in which security is also built in as a function. So when that thing comes about, where do you stand? Are you part of that system that develops that common services platform where the security is built in? So these are things that are there. It's a very exciting field. And I'm very happy to be associated with this. I'm lucky to be in this particular field. And it's a daily learning experience. And this event, it's also, I've been to the stalls and all that. I've been interacting with people. And it's a very good learning experience. And with the eminent panel that we have got of people who from academic background, the research background, and the product background, I think it should be a very enlightening experience for all of us. Thank you again for all of this. And what I do is now is I'll request that we'll have 2 minutes for each. 2 minutes preliminary remarks we'll have from each of the our panelists before I'll ask the moderator to take the further questions. I think the session we have structured in such a way is that after the 2 minutes each from the panelist, we'll have a set of questions specifically targeted at the area of expertise of the panelist that they would address. And then we'll follow it up with a session where we'll have taken questions from the audience. Thank you.